Now we're going to go on a little bit further today. We've been there in Genesis 28 verses 1 to 15, and if you remember, here's what we've been studying about. Let me see if I can get that all on there for you, and let me narrow that down a little bit. There we go. And we may need to take the care of this light over here. I think we got too much light right over in here someplace. So if we can get that out, we'll be in great shape. Maybe have a little bit more of... Let's get that right there. We're in chapter 28, how God saved Jacob, and then we have Jacob's departure. There you go. Its immense importance, its immediate impact when he left his land. Then Jacob's dream, the far country, and the fresh covenant. And that's what we just read about. We read about the fresh covenant. We see that Jacob is on a journey, just like, how many of you know that you're on a journey? How many of you look at your life as a journey? How many of you look at it as an adventure? How many of you look at it as a nightmare? Well, you're on a journey. Whether you know it or not, you're on a journey. And sometimes that our life can be a nightmare. Sometimes it's mixed in with some pleasure. And you know, basically life is that way. Basically, for all the good that we see in life, we do have some things that really send us on some loops. And we're going to see that in Jacob's life. Jacob really speaks to me because Jacob's life is much like our lives. You know, no one lives a silver spoon life. We see that life throws this mixed salad, this mixed bowl of greens to us. And there's some things in there we like, there's some things we don't like. Well, there's a reason for everything we go through. How many of you know that? There is absolutely a reason for every single thing we go through. There's a reason for what Jacob's going through. Jacob is not saved. If I could give you the... now we know salvation is a word that we use in the New Testament, and we're in the Old Testament. The equivalent for salvation in the Old Testament is called righteousness, being just, following the God of Abraham or Isaac. So I'm going to interchange those a little bit for us as we speak today. But we know that over here, Jacob is not saved. He is not righteous. He is born to a righteous family, but he is not righteous. He is doing things his own way. Just because you're born into a righteous family does not automatically make you righteous. Being born into a righteous family or a saved family does not make you saved. God never has grandchildren. He only has children. So we know that Jacob's going to have a lot to learn. He's going to need a salvation experience. And how many of you know that just because you have a salvation experience, then your life just doesn't get rosy all of a sudden just because you get saved? How many of you know that? That is not the case. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that people misnomer about Christianity. When you get saved, your life does not become rosy. What happens when you get saved is something happens inside you. Externally, you may still face the same things, the same problems. As a matter of fact, you may face the same problems with yourself and your old nature. It may come up time and time again. But there is something that happens after salvation that we're going to talk about today. And so I want you to see that he's departing from his home, and that's the best thing he can do, by the way. The best thing he ever can do is get away from mom and dad, because mom and dad were hurting him. Dad had his problems, and they were staying all the way to his deathbed. Mom had her problems. Remember, she was just finagling as much as anybody else. And so he needed to strike out on his own, and he did that. And Jacob has a dream. He goes to a far country. Now, anybody that knows about being away from home, I know that a lot of us have been to Jamaica, and a lot of us have been to California in this last week. And it's nice to go out there, but it's real nice to come back home. Matter of fact, I told Cheryl something that was really weird. I don't know if I was just tired or what, but we got into customs in Atlanta, and I'm not a real emotional person, but we got into customs in Atlanta, and I was the first one through the customs, and the customs agent stamped my passport, and he said, "Welcome back to America." And I started to tear up, and I said, "What's wrong with me? I must need some sleep or something." But being in a far country is not always easy. And so Jacob is striking out on his own, and he doesn't have the conveniences you and I have. And when he starts to travel, he's going to travel pretty far from his home. Matter of fact, I'm going to show you that he's going to travel about 550 miles, and it's not by car or by airplane. He's going to go by foot and on foot. So he goes to a far country. He has no idea where he's going. He has never been there before. And he is going someplace that his father tells him about where to go to find a wife. And what happens is we see him lying down and using the pillows, the stones as his pillows, and he has a dream. He has this dream, and he dreams, as I told you the last Wednesday night we studied Genesis, he dreams of what's called Jacob's ladder. You've seen pictures of it where angels are ascending and descending. And I told you a little insight that not a whole lot of people know. That last Wednesday we studied Genesis. I told you that Jacob's ladder was actually what he saw was Jesus. Jesus said to Nathanael, "You will see the Son of Man, and you will see angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." So actually what Jacob is seeing is a Christophany. He sees Christ in the Old Testament, and he sees Christ extended from heaven to earth. Now, when we have pictures of Jacob's ladder, we see a ladder. We see somebody paint a ladder. That was not what he saw. He saw a vision of Jesus, and he saw Jesus probably with his hands stretched to heaven and his feet planted on the earth, and a Christophany, and he saw angels ascending and descending down the Son of Man. Because Jesus said himself to Nathanael in the New Testament, from this time on, why do you marvel that I saw you under a tree? For you shall see the Son of Man, angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So Jacob's ladder was none other than Jesus himself. He's having a real vision of God. God is manifesting himself through his Son, Jesus Christ. So he has, and what happens is God gives him a fresh covenant. Let me tell you something. God will never appear to anyone without telling him something. I mean, when I go to somebody's house and I knock on the door and they open the door and I show up, they're usually going to ask me something. Why are you here? Oh, I don't know. I just stumbled and your house is there. No, we show up for reasons. You go to a home for a party. You go to a home to announce something. You go to a home because you've been invited. So there's some reason why you go. So there was a reason why God gave him this vision. It's a fresh covenant. He is reaffirming to him the promises that he gave to Abraham, his father. Now, I want you to know, and to Abraham, his grandfather, and Isaac, his father. I want you to know that Jacob is still not saved. He is seeing God. He's having some vision of him. God's giving him a promise, but he's still not righteous. He's still not saved. So it tells me a couple things. It tells me that the unsaved can get visions of God. It tells me, as a matter of fact, that the unsaved are more prone to visions of God than the saved are. We shouldn't need a vision. We're already with them. We're already following his word. But the unsaved, many times God will pop into their lives and show them something. You've heard it from people who didn't know God, and they said, I saw something. I just heard a testimony the other day about two people that were married. They moved away from their home. It almost sounds like this. And they were into drugs real heavy. As a matter of fact, it was relatives of one of our pastors. And they moved out to Colorado. And when they moved out to Colorado, they were on a high. And they came down off the high and felt miserable. Just didn't know why they were so far away from their families. And they felt terrible. And they said they both simultaneously had a vision of God, and God spoke to them and told them, if you continue, you will die. They knelt down, they gave their hearts to Jesus that day, and became very powerful Christians for the rest of, even up until now. So why would God give that dream? Why would he give that vision? Because God made promises to the generation before. And so if God made promises to the generation before, he's going to pass that down to someone. One of the greatest things you can do for your children is to know God. Is to find the promises of God. Because if you don't get them in your lifetime, guess who's going to get them? Your children. And God's going to visit your kids. And so we see this fresh covenant that's given. And then we're going to start seeing a firm conviction. That's where we're going to pick it up today. At the end part of Jacob's dream, B, firm conviction. And I want to read to you verses 16 and 17. I already read 16, but let's go on. And Jacob awakened out of his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place. Now, I want you to know that that is a confession of faith. He is, for the first time in his life, saying, I have seen God. Surely the Lord, not something I ate, not something I was told about. Surely the Lord was in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? Now, don't think about that word as something foreboding. He meant how powerful that place was. How dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. He has said, my vision has brought me to a spot where I'm at the house of God. And this is actually the gate of heaven. This is the fresh covenant. Jacob's dream, and we talk about dreams. Last Wednesday we met on Genesis study. We talked about what they meant. Well, Jacob had an immediate interpretation of what it meant. He saw it as the house of God, the place where God was dwelling. He recognized that the dream wasn't just about angels, it was about God himself. And he also recognized that that dream had something to do with him, a lot to do with him, and that this was a portal to God's house. He recognized that this spot, way out in the wilderness, he's finding God. Way out in a spot where nobody's around, where he has stones for a pillow, he is finding God. Let me tell you something. The greatest spot you'll ever find God is not in church. Church is great. It's great to remind you about God, but you're not going to find the most powerful manifestation of God in your life in church. You're going to find it when you're alone, when you're in trouble, when you have a need, when nobody else is around to help you. God is relevant to us only as our needs are there. See, we wouldn't need God if we didn't have any needs. That's why America is so far behind in following God, because we've been self-sufficient. And the more self-sufficient we become, the less we feel that we need God. Many times, God's got to get us to a lonely spot, to an isolated spot, to a spot of desperation. I don't like desperation any more than you do. How many of you like desperation? How many of you like frustration and I don't like frustration and desperation. If you want to learn about frustration, I guess it's fresh in my mind, so I'll tell you, you need to go to Jamaica. Some of us that have been there, you know, they tell you that you ask for something, they tell you in a Jamaican minute. You know what that means? That means you'll be here for a long, long time. You want to go travel for some supplies, it's going to take all day. It's not like you go down to Lowe's, pick up your stuff and go back. It's going to take all day. The roads, I was traveling in the rental car I had, and there are so many bumps in the roads, and you got to go fast because everybody else goes fast, and there's a third lane that appears. They have 2 lanes, and a third lane appears wherever they want to. And you know, think about me. I'm from America, and they give me this car that I'm driving on the wrong side of the car. The gas is on my right foot, the brake is on my left foot, or at least I'm taking my right foot off the brake. Every time I'd start that car up, I'd go forward. I'd jump, I'd lunge every time I put it, because I thought I was on the brake and I was on the gas. Now, I've been there 4 times, 5 times, so I've done this before. And you get down the road and you're on the wrong side of the road, and you're driving, you're wondering whether you should make the right turn from the left lane or the left turn from the right, and every now and then you foul up and you start reverting back to America, and you drive like you did in America. One time I had a car down there, and it was a stick shift. You talk about a nightmare. I was on the right-hand side of the car. There was the gas on the right-hand side, then the brake, then the clutch pedal, which was with my left foot, which I really wasn't sure about. Then they had the stick on my left hand, which was not on the floor, but it was on the side of the wall of this van. My father-in-law was riding with me in the front seat. About a mile down the road, he said, "I can't handle it." He went in the back seat. But you talk about frustration. I'm driving down, you hit every pothole. They're all potholes with a little bit of pavement around it, a little bit of macadam. And I started to feel that the car was losing air. Now, it's a rental car, has 1 spare, and I've had 3 flats at one time before. So I pulled into a gas station, and they came. I said, "I think my tire's low." They came out, not with air. They came out with a mallet, a brass mallet, and some water. And everybody, Pastor Steve was looking like, "What's he doing with that?" I said, "He's going to bang the rim back in." Looks at the rim, and he can see, he puts the water over, sees the bubbles come out, takes that mallet and starts banging that rim back in while it's on the car, and then they fill it up with air. So you go to get your air, you have to get your rim banged back. And so it can be very frustrating. And let me just say this, that as you're doing that, you know, what happens is we know that we have this loneliness that's out there, and we know that we feel all alone, we feel helpless. And I really did. I mean, I felt helpless the first couple times I went to Jamaica. Now I understand it, and so I'm okay. But you know, it's the same thing in life, even if you're in America. If there's circumstances that you can't change, there are certain things you can't change, and you're facing them. And it seems the harder you try, the deeper you go, and the more dense you get in your rim. Well, God sometimes allows those things for us to understand who we are, for us to understand who He is, that we need Him. In Genesis chapter 28, verse 16 and 17, you'll see a firm conviction. Compelled to leave his father's house, Jacob finally found that God, in His infinite grace, was offering him His house. Notice, he left his father's house, and what does he say that place is? He says that's the house of God. Well, when we finally find God's house, we're getting there. We're getting to that point which we call salvation. We're getting to that point which we realize is righteousness. He's getting saved, is what we would call it. He is realizing that his father's house isn't where he wanted to be. I believe up in here he probably longed for his own father's house. Why am I leaving? All those questions. Why am I leaving my father's house? Why am I going out here? Why am I doing this? I feel all alone. But I believe after this point, he's not saying that anymore because he's found God's house. And let me tell you something. God's house is better than your dad's house any given day of the year. Because when you find God's house, you realize that you found God. You find God's house, and how many of you know that God's going to be in His house when you find God's house? Now, here's how it boils down, and we need to really remember it as we see it. I told you this before, and I want to reaffirm it to you so that you know where we're going in these chapters. See, it's 4 phases of our spiritual growth as parallel to Jacob. Remember I told you a couple of Wednesdays ago? First of all, there's the saving phase. We are at it right now in Genesis chapter 28. This is what it means to be saved. We're going to show you Jacob how he got saved. He's getting saved right now. He's getting righteous. And then what happens after that is the spots that I don't like and you don't like. The subduing phase and the separating phase. From chapters 29, and we're going to develop 29 today, 29 to 32, these take the longest period of time. And the separating phase. See, after God saves us, He's got to tie us down. He's got to subdue us. And what happens is, just getting saved is not your goal in life. Just to get your name written down in the book of heaven is not what you want in life. That is the start. That's a good step. But that's not going to get you a fulfilled life. How many of you know that? It may get you heaven, but you don't necessarily have to, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to live a joyous life. If you want to live a joyous life and feel the fruits of God and fruits of your labor, then you're going to have to get subdued by God. Now, let me tell you something. Every single one of us need to be subdued. If a madman ran in here today, and he tried to come up to me and slice my throat, hopefully I would ask and see some of you men, hopefully I wouldn't have to ask, but I'd see some of you men jump on him and subdue him before he gets to me. Hopefully. I mean, if you really care about me at all. But I would hope that would be the case. If you didn't, I guarantee you I'm going to. And so we subdue him. Well, when we get saved, that gives us entrance into the house of God. Obviously, that man that would come in here would have entrance into this place, and so he could have entrance, but he needs to be subdued. If he came to the right spot, but with the wrong motives. You know, I want him to come to the house of God, even if he has some problems. I want him to come to the house of God, but not to kill me. So he's got the wrong motives. Well, it's the same thing with our salvation. A lot of people, this is going to make sense to you on why you can see some saved people act strange. Getting saved is just the first part of it. You can get saved and come to the house of God with the wrong motives. You're going to have to be subdued. And let me tell you something, every single one of us needs to be subdued. Every one of us needs to be tied down, because every single one of us have some quirks in our personalities. We have some things that go against God, that make it hard for us to follow him, that bring wrong motives into his house. And I don't feel bad about saying that, because I can include myself there. So I don't think you should feel bad about hearing that. We need to be subdued. Then there's the separating phase. Okay, after God subdues you, what's he going to do? Well, he has to separate you. He's got to tell you who you are. When you get saved, you do not know who you are. You think you know who you are, but you really don't know. You don't have a clue. See, God saves you for an ultimate purpose. Is this making sense to you? This is powerful. He saves you for an ultimate purpose. I know people in church that never understand why God saved them. That's because they're not at the separating phase yet. But you've got to work through these things. There's many people who die in one of these phases, by the way. Never getting to the point of knowing where they should fit in the kingdom of God. Never really getting subdued. Now, they'll go to heaven, but somewhere down the line, they didn't live that life to the fullest. Do you know what I'm talking about? So our ultimate goal, as long as we have life, is to quickly pass through these phases so we can get to the last phase, which is the sanctifying phase. Now, sanctification means this. You are set apart for God. Sanctification means that you finally realize that your entire life has been blessed, anointed, and set apart for God's use. That doesn't matter if you're a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter. Doesn't matter if you're a CEO of a company. It doesn't matter if you're a pastor. You finally realize, man, my life is to magnify God. It's sanctified. Everybody that comes into the church gets a little bit of sanctification at their salvation. They get set apart for God, but they do not get full sanctification until they work through these phases. You and I are in one of these 4 stages right now in our Christian growth. Some of us here just got saved. Some of us here are being subdued right now. Some of us here are being separated right now, called out. Some of us are in that sanctifying phase where we finally realize why we got saved and what God's really doing through us, and we feel that fulfillment in it. And so it's not a condemnation, whatever phase you're in. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand the phase you're in and understand that there's people who went through the same thing that you're going through right now. Let me show you this. Can you place yourself? Can you see the next phase for you? Can you realize your God-given potential? Let me ask this. I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand. If you can place yourself in one of these phases, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Okay. If you can place yourself. If you can't, you need to before this is over. Can you see the next phase for you? Raise your hand. If you can place yourself, you should be able to see the next phase. And can you realize your God-given potential? Let me tell you this. Most of us cannot. But God sees us like we don't see us. In fact, I'm going to be preaching about that a little bit later on. Now, you're going to watch Jacob, because he will be our example. He's going to bring us through every single phase. As we go on, let me show you Jacob's decision. We've been telling you about his dream. Now we'll move on to C. Let me show it to you right here. This keeps me on the line here. Jacob's decision. Let me show you what he did with his salvation. And by the way, whatever phase you think you're at, make sure you do these 3 things. Because after salvation, if you don't do these 3 things, you stop your phase. You stay at salvation level, which is a great level, but you never get subdued. If you're not doing these 3 things that we're going to preach today, and we're going to teach you this morning, if you don't do these 3 things, you will freeze forever, the rest of your life, at salvation. Now, you can't say I didn't tell you. You can't say that you haven't known. because I'm going to give it to you. It's in the Word, it comes out in Jacob's life, and it has to be done. First of all, with his salvation, right here, Jacob gets saved. He realizes he's in God's house. Let me show you his decision. He acts promptly. Let me tell you, the closing verses of this chapter marks Jacob's first steps as a changed man, a saved man, if you will. It's a chronicle of what should happen to us when we get saved. Now, I wish somebody told me this when I got saved. I wish the first day I got saved, somebody sat me down and said, here's what you got to do. These are the 3 things you got to do. No one told me this. I didn't learn this till I started studying. I mean, thank God I did it, but I didn't learn it, and that it had to be done until a long time later. But you were going to learn it right now. First of all, he acts promptly. Look at Genesis 28, verse 18, and just the first part of that, A. And Jacob rose up early in the morning. That's all I want to read to you. He rose up early in the morning. Now, how many of you know that the Holy Spirit is inspiring these words? How many of you know that if it was a regular thing for Jacob to rise up early in the morning, it wouldn't have said anything? How many know that if it says he rose up early in the morning, it's probably because he didn't used to? How many of you have teenagers? How many of you know teenagers, the last thing they like to do is rise up early in the morning? How many of you know that sometimes people, even though they rise early in the morning and they're used to that, sometimes depression can get them to stay in bed a little longer than normal? Something's happening inside Jacob, and I want you to see it. I want to analyze it. Look, he rose up early in the morning. It's a new life that's pulsating in his soul. Earth looked greener. Heaven looked bluer. He noticed the birds, the flowers. He breathed deeper. He loved stronger. Something was happening to him. And I take that for he rose up early in the morning to say this. He started to understand that he was alive in his world. So many people walk around like dead men in their world. They are depressed. There's so many things. Something's happening inside. When you get saved, something ought to happen inside you. There ought to be some type of feeling inside you. Yes, there's an emotional feeling also. Something ought to happen. You ought to start seeing things differently. Let me tell you something. When I got saved, people could hurt me before. The day before, they could hurt me, and I would plot to get back at them. There would be no way they would get away with it. When I got saved, I stopped my plotting. Something happened. Somebody said to me, my whole family started saying to me, your face looks different. I didn't do anything different, but something was happening inside me. Salvation does something in us. I physiologically believe, although I can't prove it, I think a chemical change happens inside of us. I think when we understand love, I think love, so one of these days scientists may figure it out, I think the fountain of youth has to do with love. Do you ever see 2 people who are in love? Do you ever see a woman who is expecting a child? Do you ever see what happens to their face? Do you ever see what happens to the face of people who are in love? Something happens. There's a change inside. It changes their whole nature and their whole makeup. Well, Jacob is realizing that there's a God in heaven who loves him. He's not feeling that before. He gets up early. Something's different. I remember when I got saved, man, I used to shoot birds before I was saved. I mean, I just take target practice at them. I just didn't matter to me. When I got saved, I felt so guilty about shooting robins. And I'd be out my window with a BB gun shooting robins. I loved to hunt, and so I would hunt every time I could, whether it was a BB gun or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with hunting, but there was something wrong with shooting birds that you shouldn't be, songbirds that you shouldn't be shooting. When I got saved, I got convicted of that. Could you imagine? There I am smoking dope and drinking, and I'm convicted about shooting a robin. Why? Because something was happening inside me. A change was taking over. I was starting to look at my world differently. And salvation has got to, that's how I know I'm saved. I know I'm saved because I'm thinking differently. Because something happened to me. So, how many of you understand what I'm talking about? Man, you start looking, people can hurt you like they never hurt you before, and it really doesn't bother you a whole lot. Maybe a little bit if you think about it. But you really kind of get over it after a while. How many know what I'm talking about? Something happens. That's an evidence of salvation. Remember, Jacob is a deceiver. He's a supplanter. He's one to get up on somebody else. He will never be second. And something happened to him that day. He gets up and something's different. It's the salvation experience. It wasn't that it was a new morning or a new world. It was that he was a new man. And believe me, salvation has to make a new man out of you. Jacob's decisions. The first thing he did is he acted promptly. I want to show you what he did secondly. Read Genesis 28. This is the first thing he did. He acted promptly. Let me show you the second thing he did. He acted purposefully. He had a purpose to his life. Look at Genesis 28:18b. And it says, and he took the stone that he had put for his pillows and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of the place Bethel, but the name of that city was called Luz at the first. Again, every single word God has there for a reason. Now notice that the stones that he was using for a pillow became his solid pillar. So now a stone pillow becomes a solid pillar. What does that mean? What is he doing? Why? What kind of purpose is that? What kind of act is that? If he's acting purposefully, what's he going through? And he pours oil on it to sanctify it. He calls the place, he renames the spot Bethel. Does anybody know what Bethel means? Beth is the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It's the letter Beit. Beit is whenever it was, and this is why it means house, by the way. Beit means house. The reason it means house is because all language was picture language at first. And the letter Beit is actually shaped like a house. And so the word house came from the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is Beit. El is the name for God. Elohim, Daniel, Mahel, Alil, Beth El, El Shaddai. So El is the name for God. So he says it's the house, Beit El, the house of God. If you go down in Birmingham someplace, you're going to see Beth El Kai, which is the house of the Lord, house of God the Lord. And so Bethel, many temples, Jewish synagogues are named Bethel, the house of God, and then something maybe after it. So he says he takes his stone pillows, and I'm not really sure how you can lay on stone pillows, but I guess you can. Actually, when I ride on planes, I would settle for something behind my neck, even if it was a stone. But he takes the stone pillows, and he takes the stones and he rearranges them into a pillar. Now, what does that mean? He takes what his head laid on, his pillows, what he used to think about, what used to separate him from God. By the way, the word luz means to be separated from. And so we have a real indication here. Man, isn't it neat the way God uses places and names to say his story? Everything dovetails. So we have this word which means separated, a place of separation. And in fact, when he came to Luz, he was separated from God. He was away from God. But by the time it gets done, he is now calling this place God's house. No longer is he separated. So what is this stone pillar? Well, the pillar is a testimony. Let me tell you something. His devices, his trickery, his deceit had separated him from God. He belonged in Luz. But that night that he had that dream and the revelation of God, he now names it the house of God. He sets up a stone pillar, a testimony. And by the way, our testimonies are not what we did in the world. Our testimonies is that we bring it into the house of God and say, God, look what God has done for me. You know, many times I hear testimonies, and my testimony, I get tired, and I've gotten tired of telling it because it's so much junk and garbage. But let me tell you what my testimony should serve as. It shouldn't serve as, look at who I used to be and all the bad things I did. It should serve as, look at who I am now and the fact that I don't do those things now. The things in my head, my stone head with my stone pillow, when it was out in the world, separated me from God. But I can rearrange that stone cold head and that stone cold heart, set up a pillar in the house of God and say, look at, here's Mark Harrell now. Here's who I am now. I'm not that person. I'm this person. So the stone pillar becomes a testimony. Anybody that goes past there is going to look at that pillar and say, man, something happened there. If you go to the Middle East, and those of you that are going to go to Israel with me in March 2000, we're going to go down to the Sinai Desert. We're going to go down to not only the Sinai, but we're going to go down to the Negev, and we're going to go down by the Dead Sea. And you're going to see little pillars erected of stones all over the place, all over the desert. The Bedouins erect them. Some of the old-time Jews erect them. They're a spot where something happened to them. Either they had a revelation of God or God spoke something to them. It's like if you were home and you read your word and God spoke something to you. How many of that ever happened? And God showed you something. Well, what they would do is they would take the stones around them because their home is outside. Their home is the desert. Many of them are Bedouins and wanderers. They take the stones around them as soon as they felt something from God, and they'd erect a pillar so that they remembered that that's the spot God spoke something to them. That's powerful. It's a token. And so we see that he's taking a token. He's saying, I am no longer going to be Jacob of old. I'm taking these stone pillows, the way I used to lay my head down and all of the deceit I had, all the thoughts I had. You know, when we go to bed, we think about all the things we want to do, don't we? Everything in our lives rehashed through our heads. Whether it's evil or whether it's good, we start thinking a whole lot right before we go to bed. Or when we wake up, or when we get up in the middle of the night. How many of you ever had sleepless nights? How many of you ever had those? And you get up and you couldn't stop thinking about certain things. Well, let me tell you something. Either you're thinking about things of God or you're thinking about things of self. It's not going to go any other way. It's either going to be things of God or things of self. Either how you can get back at somebody or how you can forgive somebody or what God wants you to do or what you want to do. And so Jacob realizes that he's thinking differently. I'm taking these pillows. This is the last time I'm going to lay on these stones this way. I'm not going to lay down with my trickery. I'm not going to lay down with all my thoughts. I'm not going to lay down with what I want. I'm going to take these stones and I'm going to rearrange them. No longer am I going to sleep on these stone pillows with the same thought thoughts I used to have. I am not going to be separated from God anymore. So he takes them and he erects a pillar and he says, this is going to remind me that this is the last night I'll sleep on stones with the thoughts I had. This is going to remind me that my thoughts now are erected to God. Those pillows, instead of being horizontal on the earthly level, think about it, the stones are now erected on a plane that's vertical right to God. So he's saying my thoughts no longer are earthly. Isn't this powerful? No longer are earthly, but now my thoughts are going to be heavenly. I'm going to line them up with God. That is neat. Let me tell you something. If you want to find out what to do after you get saved, the first thing you got to do is act promptly. The second thing you got to do is act purposefully. Get up with a new step. Understand that God has done something for you. Stop thinking the way you used to think and start thinking godly. Stop thinking on an earthly level, but start thinking on a godly level. You want to get past salvation and get on to the next part? Let me tell you something. You have got to do these two things. If you don't do them, you will stall in your salvation phase for the rest of your life. You have got to start thinking differently, and you have got to start acting differently, acting promptly, saying that, listen, there's something else here. I'm a new man. Something's changed in me. The world's changed. I'm changed. I'm going to start thinking differently. And then he does one last thing. Those two things are pretty easy to do, in a sense. But he does something a little bit different than that. Listen, salvation should give us a new prompting and a new purpose. But the third thing he does is he acts practically. Look at Genesis 28, 20 to 22. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. Now, acknowledging the Lord's presence and the Lord's provision and the Lord's protection, he vows a vow. It's the first time ever this word is mentioned in Scripture, the word vow. There's many times vows are said in Scripture, but this is the first time ever. Vow is the word nadar, and it means to promise to give something or do something for God. Now, I want to put a warning here. Be very, very careful what you vow to God. As a matter of fact, I am not an advocate of vows, except if you really mean them. Because I don't believe a vow should be broken. A vow, when you vow it, you should not have an intention to break it. When God looks at us performing vows, and a vow is a promise to God. You know, I've heard people say, God, if you get me out of this situation, I promise I'll serve you the rest of my life. Let me tell you what you do when you don't do that. If God gets you out of that situation and you do not serve Him the rest of your life, you will see yourself in that situation over and over and over and over and over again the rest of your life. God takes vows very seriously when we vow a vow. And so vows are extremely important. Now, when God promises something to us, God will never break His promises. If He opens His mouth and says something, you better bank on it. God will never change it. Now, He knows the human condition. He knows we break our vows. So that's why it's very important for us to be very careful with vows we make. Let me show you what He says. He vows a vow, and look at verse 20. And he says to promise to give something or to do something for God. Look at verse 21a. So that I come again to my father's house in peace. A better translation is, since God is with me. In verse 20 it says, and Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God be with me. A better translation is, since God is with me. Does anybody have that in your translations? Instead of if, you have since. You have since. That's a better translation there. It's not if God be with me. He's not saying, God, if you're with me, I'll make you a deal. He's not saying that. He's not saying, I'll make you a deal, God. As long as you stay with me, I'll stay with you. That's not what He's saying. It seems that that's the way it looks, but it's not the way He's saying. He's saying, since God is with me, since I've seen God, then here's what I'm going to do. And so he vows this vow. It was a verbal confession of Jacob's inner heart conversion and conversation. But he's not finished. He says, since God be with me, or if God be with me, since God be with me. Look at 21b. Then shall the Lord be my God. And verse 22, look at this one. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that thou giveth me, I surely will give thee the tenth unto thee. First time he's vowing this, and he's saying something. How does he know about a tenth? Well, Abraham had given a tenth to Melchizedek. You got to ask yourself a couple questions here. What in the world is he doing? Well, he's acting promptly. He's got a new step to his purpose, a new step to his life. He's acting purposefully. He's setting up a pillar, he's testifying, and he's acting practically. He's saying, God, you've given me everything. I realize it now. So a tenth of everything you've given me, I'm giving back to you. And notice he does it at the place called God's house. Now, we've had a lot of teaching about tithes and a lot of misteaching about it, but let me tell you this. When they first told me, when I got saved, I got saved. How many know what I'm talking about? It was a drastic turnover from being a Catholic and a heathen to wanting God there. My testimony stood right there as a pillar, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I just went and told all my friends, all my dope friends, 100 of them probably, couldn't supply them with any more dope. I was making a pillar. But then they told me that I should tithe. I just got a job. I just had a brand new car, a Z28 Camaro. Couldn't make ends meet, but I was excited inside about God. And they said, oh yeah, there's something else you got to do. And I said, what's that? You got to give 10% of everything you earn to God. I said, no way. Are you crazy? I said, why would he want that? God owns everything. What does he need my money for? That doesn't make any sense. And they said, no, you got to do it. And I said, well, show me that in the Bible. I had to say that. Forget that I didn't even know a verse of Scripture, but I wanted to know where it was because it was affecting my wallet. If you get saved only down to here, your heart, you ain't saved. It's got to go past your wallet. So I said, you're going to have to show me that. Cheryl told me. I said, you're going to have to show me that, Cheryl. I said, I just don't understand. I said, no wonder why you go out and try to make converts. You want your money in your churches. Listen, I can argue the best of them. She said, no. She says, it really doesn't matter to us. I said, well, good. I'll give it to another church. Thought I got her. And she said, it's okay. You can do that. So, but God does tell you to take it into the storehouse where you're being fed. I said, see, I told you. I said, you got to show me that. And I said, what sense does that make? Well, what sense does that make? What sense does it make to give 10% of what you earn to God? What's with that? Why would God require us to do that? Anybody have any idea?
To support his ministry.
Support his ministers, that's great, but why doesn't God support his ministers? If God, I'm playing, okay? Just let me go a little bit. You're right.
Well, it teaches obedience, and also you must be willing as well as obedient.
Well, why do we have to have obedience in our money?
God over that as well.
God wants it.
You know why? Because it's the thing we revolve around. Every single one of us, what's important to us is our finances. Sooner or later, one of the common things that runs through mankind is his desire for wealth. His desire to subdue and conquer. That was the first command to Adam and Eve. And if you talk to anybody, it's going to come up sooner or later about their status and what they earn. And well, a tenth is really neat. I think about the IRS and I think about the government and how they're worried about the taxes and how they want a flat tax and there's so many people against it. They are so ridiculous. There's no other solution except a flat tax. That's what God has. He's got a flat tax, 10%. 10% for you is as relative to 10% for me no matter what you earn. If you earn $1 a year, 10% for you is the same ratio if I earn $1 million a year. Same ratio for me. It's equal. It's something that is fair all the way down the line. Actually, it's not fair living in America and paying a bracketed tax. That's not fair. That hinders and that hurts the ones who have the desire to go out and work. How many are with me? But why would God ask this? Well, because it's so important. You've got to ask yourself another question. It's so important to us. There I am. I'm making, I think it was like $200, maybe $150 a week, and had a great job, $150 a week. My bills were $155 a week. And I'm wondering where I'm going to get this $5 from to pay my bills, what I could sell. And somebody comes up and says, well, $15 more of your money, which was a lot to me then, has got to go to God. And then I'm starting to figure out, well, now, is this gross or is this net? And Cheryl came up with a great one-liner. Well, do you want to be blessed grossly or do you want to be blessed netly? And so I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, well, what does this mean? Why would God want this? It really confused me. And I see Jacob and I think, why, after he first gets saved, would he... I understand why he would feel different because I felt different. I did. I understood why he wanted to have a testimony because I had a great testimony. But why in the world, on his own, would he go and say, God, I'm going to give you 10% of everything I have? Well, and by the way, the 10% back then was a lot more than the 10% now. What does that mean, Pastor? Well, today 10% has to do with numbers and money, but back then it didn't. 10% of the flock would be the best of the flock. They were always worth more money-wise. So they would take the 10% of the flock, but only the best of the flock. They wouldn't take 10%. It's like when I used to be Catholic and we had Lent. How many of you used to be Catholic? Former Catholics. Or how many Catholics right now? Sometimes we have some Catholics in here. I used to be Catholic. In Lent, you had to give something up for Lent. When Holy Week came, you had to give something up. I usually gave up peas and liver. Figure if you got to give something up, I'll give something up that I don't like. How many of you know that defeats the purpose? That's not what they're talking about. Well, that's the same thing with this. It wasn't 10% of the worst of the flock. It was 10% of the best of the flock. So monetarily, it was a lot more than 10% when it came down to money. And so that's your answer for net or gross. But the thing is, why would he do that? Well, he would do it because he realized that God was requiring something of him practically. See, Christianity is real easy if there's no practical side to it. It's real easy to think about all the one-liners. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to close in a bit, talk about in the after service about one-liners. We have these great one-liners. And I don't want to preach my message, but I'll do a little bit for you, a little hint of it. We have these great one-liners. Be a Christian, and no weapon formed against you shall prosper. They're great one-liners, but we can't live our life on one-liners. They have got to be real to us. It's got to be practical. We could believe in Jesus being on the cross. We could believe that he died for our sins. We could believe all the things of the Scriptures. But somewhere down the line it has to have a practical application. And Jacob knew it. I have got to do something practical here. And so what he does is he tithes. He says, it's going to affect me. This thing has to affect me. It's got to change my life practically. And so he tithes. Now, I think that's the first bell, so I have another one to go yet. Let me show you. It says in verse 21b, then shall the Lord be my God. Since God is with me, then shall the Lord be my God. This is practical evidence of Jacob's conversion. Up to now, the ruling passion of his heart was greed. He always had to get things and blessings. Now he wanted to give. A true sign of someone who is really born again. It reminds me of one of the New Testament conversions in Luke chapter 19, a famous conversion of Zacchaeus. And as we see what Zacchaeus does is he says, I will give. What he does is he comes down from the tree and he recognizes Christ and he has a conversion right there at the bottom of the sycamore tree in Jericho. And he says, I will give a half of everything I have to the poor. I mean, nobody told him to do that. He just had this desire to give. And let me share something. This day, Jesus said to him, this day is salvation come into thy house. That was what Jesus said to him. Zacchaeus wasn't saved because he gave. Then he says, I'll give half. After Jesus tells him he's saved, he says, I'll give half of what I have, all my earnings to the poor. Zacchaeus wasn't saved because he gave. He gave because he was saved. It's the same thing with Jacob. Some folks get that all mixed up. They think if I give, I'm saved. No, no, no. You're saved first, and that's why you want to give. Otherwise, don't give at all. Thus Jacob, at the first day of his conversion, promised the Lord that he would never forget two things. One, he would never forget God's place where his testimony was, and he would never forget God's portion, the tithe. It was a great start for Jacob. I'm going to talk to you next week about, Lord willing, about chapter 29, and we're going to talk about the subduing of Jacob. He has a great start, but from this point on, he's going to have to get wrestled down, and we're going to talk about his subduing.